Hello, hello, hello. Good evening, everyone. And thank you and welcome to this masterclass. It's so much more. And tonight we are going to be talking about immunity. And all right, so we're talking about immunity tonight, how to strengthen immunity, balance autoimmunity, and reduce the occurrence of chronic infections. Now, this is all building, again, this is all building on the mind-body connection to optimal wellness and the roadmap to optimal wellness, right? And this is the roadmap to improving your health. And what this does is it gives you the sequence of what to look at first, what to do next, right? What to look at third and fourth and so on. So again, what we've covered so far in the roadmap is we've already talked about the first pillar, which is fuel delivery. And we talked about circulation and oxygen. And then we also talked about blood sugar balance, right? And then next we moved into pillar number 2, which is lifting metabolic and immune function. And we started with the bridge into the metabolic and immune function through the digestive system. And then last week, of course, we talked about the immunity in the gut and the systemic effects of that and what the problems are created there. And so we discussed leaky gut and how that's not a gut problem, that's actually an immune system problem. It's just a challenge that happens in the gut. So to help tie all this together, we're going to dive deeper into the immune system and specifically immune system balance tonight. And so this is where we're at on our map. We have our 4 pieces as we've come along our roadmap. So immune balance, right? This is really, really important because the key word here is balance, because we don't want an overactive immune system because then we see allergies and autoimmunity. But then again, we don't want an immune compromised system either, because that's when you get infections, and reoccurring infections. So what we want is to be resilient, right? We want a resilient immune system, or we want an adaptable immune system. But sometimes things get out of balance. It gets polarized to one side or the other, right? And that kind of wreaks havoc in our body. So let's look at this, the immune system. Basically, we have 2 branches of the immune system. One is called the T helper 1, and the other branch is called T helper 2. Sometimes we hear about them as innate immunity or an adaptive immunity. And sometimes they'll just say TH1 and TH2. Now the TH helper or the T helper 2 branch consists of B cells, which create antibodies. And it also has T cells in there as well. And we're going to focus tonight on the B cells because they make the antibodies. And the antibody is how your immune system remembers the bugs or the bad guys or the pathogens, right? This is how your immune system develops immunity against something that is either like a foreign pathogen or an invader, right? Now, on the other side, we have the T helper 1 system. This is your innate immunity, and this includes your natural killer cells and other cells that are considered cytotoxic cells. And there's a whole list of cells in this group. So I'm not going to go into them, but just other cells. And then specifically, we're going to talk about our natural killer cells as well. So these are the immune cells that go in and kill the actual bugs, right? Kills the actual pathogens, right? So I like to look at it like this. The T helper 1 system, or your innate immune system, is like the Navy SEALs, right? They're the snipers that actually go into the body and pull the trigger to kill whatever is in the body, right? And the T helper 2 system is more like the CIA, right? It's like your intelligence officers. They are remembering and tracking and the bad guys. They're like putting tracker tags on them so that we can remember who they are next time, right? So your immune system has these 2 branches, and it is in constant balance like a teeter-totter. One side will go higher for the first few days of an infection, and the T helper 1 system will increase and it'll be much more active because you're trying to kill those bad guys, right? And then after the initial 3 to 5 days of an infection, the T helper 2 system kicks in and starts making a lot of antibodies so that your immune system can remember the pathogens or invaders, so that next time it doesn't really have to work as hard. So what we need to remember is that it's always working like this teeter-totter to build up immunity. And just like everything in the body, we work in tandem as a symphony, right? It's just like the gas pedal and the brake pedal, the sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight, and then the parasympathetic nervous system, rest and relax. Every single thing in the body is working in balance, right? Now, in a normal, resilient immune system, one side will go after the infection and it will come back down, and then the other side will go up and produce the antibodies, and then that will come back down. And basically, everything just always works out in balance. Now, what happens when people have chronic conditions, recurring infections, or, systemic inflammation? What happens in this case is basically this pushes the T helper 2 system, right, into overdrive and causes your body to start creating tons of antibodies. So what happens when you get this surge in antibody response, these immune cells become much more active. And it turns out, because this acts like a teeter-totter, when this side gets really, really active, it suppresses the T helper 1 cells. So when one side goes up, the other side goes down, right? And so what happens when the T helper 1 cells are suppressed is they're not out there killing the actual infection. And so what happens here is the infection is being recognized at a high level. And so it's creating like inflammation and everything else, but the natural killer cells are not going out and actually killing the guy. And so we're never really clearing all of the infection out of our body. And what happens is these types of infections will get stuck in our hollow spaces in our body, right? And so what kind of infections are we talking about? We're talking about viruses, candida, bacteria, even parasites, right? And these typically do not clear out. And we will hold these in the empty spaces. And so we're talking about sinus cavities here. We're talking about lungs, our stomach, the intestinal tract is basically a big empty tube that goes to the outside world, right? Your bladder is an open cavity, your vaginal canal. And we get these chronic infections that recur over and over and over because it's just kind of hiding out in these hollow cavities and it's not being cleared out. So what we see is people get chronic sinusitis, right? They're just over and over recurrent sinus infections, maybe chronic upper respiratory infections, right? Chronic strep throat, right? Where the tonsils are basically filled with infection and it just keeps continuing to infect the body. And your body's just it's struggling to clear it out. You can get gut infections, SIBO, parasites, all kinds of things. But what happens is they start to just recur over and over and over. And the reason is because the T helper 2 adaptive system is creating tons of antibodies and it's noticing them, and we're getting the inflammation and we're getting the trigger. But because T helper 2 is so responsive, T helper 1, the natural killer cells that are supposed to destroy and get rid of those, is not responsive because it's out of balance, right? And so where does this start, right? So if we go back to the roadmap, as we travel back to the roots, it could have started in leaky gut. It could have been even before that with poor digestion. Remember, we talked about if you don't have the right enzymatic balance in our stomach, then we'll oftentimes get pathogens in that cannot be, that make it all the way into our intestine, right? And it could actually even go back before that. It could be blood sugar imbalance is leading to inflammation, which is keeping us out of balance. So there's a lot of things as we go back: circulation, oxygenation, all of these things can contribute to what we are talking about here. And this is why we recommend using a foundational program that addresses all 4 pillars of the roadmap to improve your health all the time. Because this practice of supporting all 4 pillars all the time helps us to not need to diagnose any specific issues. We can just increase support for the challenges that we face when we need a little extra help. So we're basically nourishing and supporting everything. And then anytime we have a challenge, we can increase that specific support that we need, right? And so when we look at this and we look at the T helper 2 cells are too active and the T helper 1 cells are suppressed, right? So therefore you cannot kill the infection, and these infections are just allowed to be there. So you didn't catch these infections. I think that's really important. Sometimes we're taught that there's bugs in the world and we catch these infections, right? I'm going to present another idea. And what I like to say is we have this terrain, right? We have this body that's like our environment, right? And our terrain is actually determined by toxicity levels, nutrient status, right? Stress, hormones, pH balance, pathogens, and all of these things determine our internal terrain. And so if your terrain is toxic and it's not healthy, then your immune system might be more compromised and you'll struggle to fight off infection. So when you have these immune system problems, you can't just say, oh, I caught these bugs, right? Because if that was really true, the bugs in the world, right? Bacteria, viruses, everything, they're always there. So if it was true that it was the bugs problem, the reason why we get sick, then we would be sick all the time because these things are in the world all the time. So it's not actually the bugs problem. It's actually our immune system. So it's important that we look at this and try to keep it in balance and not challenged, right? Now, here's the key to remember. When this immune response creating inflammation, the T helper 2 cells getting active and the T helper 1, when all that happens, it's creating this challenge in our immune system. This inflammation is never localized, right? It's always systemic because our blood travels our entire body, right? And so this inflammation is now traveling our entire body. And this is why we get joint pain, brain fog, we can get thyroid issues, we can get, mood changes, kidney issues, inflammation, all types of things, all types of symptoms of immune imbalance. Now, specifically, when we are looking at, we have immune imbalance and we have like a regular level of immune imbalance, right? But what drives all of this process are these T helper cells. And so what happens is when we're struggling to clear infection, the natural killer cells aren't able to clear the infection, the body calls on a different type of T helper cells. It's called T helper 17. And basically this cell triggers autoimmune flare-up. And the reason why it does that is because this cell causes tissue destruction. And the reason why it does that is because not only is it good at destroying tissue, but it is one of the strongest immune killer cells, destruction cells that we have in our immune system. So when the natural killer cells, because we have this imbalance, right? And we're creating lots of antibodies, but our natural killer cells are struggling to do their job because they're suppressed. Our body says, oh, let me call in reinforcements of our T helper 17 cells, and they'll come in and search and destroy. That's literally all they do. So they will start to, attack in whatever it thinks has that pathogen on it. And so it will destroy tissue. And what happens when it destroys tissue is this is a very inflammatory process in and of itself. So as your body is not fighting off the infections, not clearing them out of your body, calling the reinforcements are coming and damaging the tissue, then that's creating more inflammation in your body also. So this is kind of like this cycle that goes around and around and around, because if y'all remember, when inflammation goes up, this triggers cortisol to be created in the body. And every time cortisol goes up, then what else goes up? Our hormone insulin goes up, right? And when we get increased insulin, then we get this thing called insulin resistance. And if you remember from a few weeks back where we talked about blood sugar, this insulin resistance leads to inflammation again, right? So if you remember, when we were talking about inflammation, I talked about we literally have to look at inflammation as something that we want to look at daily, right? So, and what happens is that this is like a pattern. It just goes round and round and round and round. And then chronic inflammation, it affects our blood, it affects our gut, it affects our brain, and it's kind of like we're almost stuck in this cycle. So how do we reset it, right? How do we cut it off and get the reset, right? Well, it all comes down to these lifestyle things. It comes down to the roadmap, first of all. We have to look at circulation. We have to look at blood sugar imbalance, right? Because that's a major driver of inflammation. We have to look at supporting proper digestion and digestive immunity, right? And then once we've looked at all those, we're supporting digestion, balancing blood sugar, avoiding alcohol. We're keeping our stress levels down. We're remembering to unwind every single day. We're getting restorative sleep, right? And then we're going to look at specifically how to support the immune system. And so we want to select supportive supplements for two specific purposes. One is to reduce inflammation, and number two is to clear infection, right? And the reason why, because when we're looking at the immune system, we want to support T helper 1 weakness and also support T helper 2 response, right? Because when we do both of those things, we can have a major wide-ranging impact in healing the body and really supporting it. Now, again, we're healing the gut, we're having balanced blood sugar, and we're addressing all the other pieces, right? But then we're coming in to nourish and support both sides of the immune system. And this will have a great impact on staying well in times of immune challenge. So what are we looking at to reduce inflammation? Well, the first thing I want to do is I want to highlight the use of Solflex PI, because the combination of the curcumin from the turmeric and the grapeseed extract, which sometimes in scientific research, we hear that as resveratrol, but this one is like the whole thing instead of just that one isolated thing, as well as the other ingredients in that formula. They help to resequence and reset this inflammatory process so that we can stop the cycle of inflammatory response, right? So just as I said a few weeks ago, when Greg had talked about Solflex PI, I take Solflex PI every single day to address systemic inflammation, right? Every single day, I want to continuously reduce systemic inflammation in my body. Why? Because I know I don't live a perfect lifestyle. I know I'm exposed to toxins, pathogens, and environmental exposure. I'm exposed to stress, chemicals that I ingest through my mouth, my skin, everything. So I want to protect my body and work on the daily process of reducing systemic inflammation, because I know that that helps my core immune system on the daily basis, as well as everything, right? Now, the second thing, if I could only recommend just one other supplement to aid in this process of resetting and resequencing the immune system. Now, of course, we're adding this to the program that supports the 4 pillars, but if I could only recommend one, it would be Solle Clear SI. And because the reason is because Solle Clear SI is incredibly formulated to nourish both T helper 1 and T helper 2 branches of the immune system at the exact same time. So for tonight, for our Soul Connection segment, I have asked Greg Halliday, the president and founder of Soul Naturals, to come and share with us more details on Solle Clear SI and some of its benefits, specifically in supporting balanced immune function.
It's good to be here. Thanks, Erica. More wise words from Erica today. I love that. I love those two, Solflex PI, Solle Clear SI. Those would be a good soulmate, SI and PI, and you just explained perfectly why. So I'm going to just try to show you a few. So SI, actually, there are 2 parts to that. That capsule comes from the core Soul Clear blends, a blend that we call Soul Clear. So think of what Eric was talking about is in terms of clearing out. It's about clearing out obstructions, anything that impedes flow of energy. And you can interpret that because of the herbs that are in there, clearing infection. She kind of explained the sequence of that. And so it has this entire blend from the yellow drink of our 4 signature drinks from Soul Excel. Half of that formula is the Soul Clear blend. The other half is the Trimaca Vibrancy blend, which is the 3 different kinds. We actually have 4 different actual materials of the 3 different varieties of maca, and then the Kupuasu. That's one half of the formula. The other half is the Soul Clear blend. And so, I'll give you the names as well, so you get a flavor for what is in what these herbs are, these key ingredients are. And I want to just say one other thing. In the capsule Soul Clear SI, this particular blend that I mentioned comes from Solle is had in a double dose. So if you use the recommended dose on the bottle, know that you're actually getting a double dose of this blend. In addition, there are 3 components that are not in the drink that we added into the capsule. So the capsule is nothing more than a double dose of the Soul Clear components from Excel, plus these 3 other ingredients, if that helps. So the first one is butcher's brew. Erica talked a little bit about blood and how important it is to keep it healthy. Butcher's brew, not only is it anti-inflammatory, it is a toner of blood vessels, and it clears things like fats and impediments in the bloodstream. That's kind of where it gets its name. Butcher's brew, cleaning the fats out, will clear things that have become hardened and things that impede the normal and balanced function of all the things that the blood has to do. In fact, so that's sort of the main fame of butcher's brew. But thrown in there, this is from Dr. Allison's training. I'm probably not going to pronounce this right. Maybe Lydia or Erica knows, but it's something called ruscogenin, ruscogenin. It is actually a chemical, one of the natural chemicals in butcher's brew that actually inhibits abnormal cell inflammation. So one of the factors, there are 2 factors involved with that in the blood, and it inhibits both. So there are several elements. Butcher's brew is much more than sort of just cleaning the cholesterol, which is where it has its fame, and a lot of herbalists like to use it that way. It's much more than that. It is much more complete and is a strong immune enhancer. Okay, so that's butcher's brew. The next one is eyebright. So there are 2 different herbs that are in here because of what they do generally, systemically in the body, but with particular attention to the eyes. Why? Because, again, returning to the health of blood vessels and how important a healthy circulation is, that directly seems to affect the eyes even more than anything else. And so eyebright and bilberry is the other one. Those are 2 other ingredients in this blend that are in the capsule that, again, are toners, tonics to blood vessels, especially these small little capillaries that you find in extremities of the body and in the eyes. In addition, it is anti-inflammatory as well. It is mucus clearing, mucus membrane balancing. Again, I always think of the mucus sort of coats everything. Things that need to get in, need to be able to pass through, but things that the body wants to catch and deal with a healthy immune system are caught and dealt with. So eyebright helps manage that balance as well. Now, there are 3 herbs that are specifically there for the lungs. And before I mention those 3, I want to mention the 4th, that there is actually one other for your blood, and that's celery. Celery seed is actually in here as well. Though it does much more, it was included again to clarify all things to do with circulation and bloodstream. So you have really those 3 herbs for blood. The 3 for the lungs, they're not just lungs, they also are upper respiratory as well, but at particular attention, these first 3 to throat and below and into the lungs: fennel, mullein, and fenugreek. So what is fennel known for? Preventing clotting of blood, decreases in blood pressure, promoting healthier circulation, taking down inflammation, calming unproductive coughs. These are just a few things. Mullein, a little more deep and profound, clearing out the lungs, a very good natural expectorant, so that it is productive in clearing out what the mucus is trapping. So again, thinking of infections and other things, not just in lungs, ear infections, anywhere that that inflammation and infection exists, mullein has been used for that as well. Fenugreek, aside from what we've talked about in aiding in healthy mucus and lung production, also helps with circulation, lowering blood pressure, lowering blood sugar that is out of balance, that is too high. Not all people know this. Dr. Allison reminded us that growth hormone, and people will actually find that and inject and do it really, I would say, artificially altering it. Fenugreek actually boosts our natural growth hormone and works right with hypothalamus and pituitary. Allergies and those immune reactions and that relation between digestive and immune are greatly balanced by fenugreek. So you've got these great lung healing products as well. So that's a little bit. Now there's one other one. It's in here and I don't mention it much, but there's a tree called pagoda tree in Japan. The flowers of that tree happen to be extremely high in quercetin. So you can get quercetin a lot of places. A number of Solle products have quercetin in them, but this flower is a particularly rich source. Not only does it help oxidation, it helps all sorts of has all sorts of clarifying effects on the blood, but it also does reduce congestion. So quercetin is another ingredient, and we mentioned quercetin like we mentioned curcumin and Sulfex PI, but really the curcumin is from turmeric, the quercetin is from pagoda tree, Japanese pagoda tree flower. Okay, so those are the components that are in the Excel. All of those are in Solle Excel, but they're doubled in the Solle Clear SI. And in that capsule, since we named it Solle Clear SI, we added those 2 letters to the blend that comes from Excel. Eric has already kind of alluded to it, but sinus and immune are the meaning of those 2 letters, sinus, immune. Solle Clear, sinus, immune. So an extra emphasis on that. So why? Well, when you look at the 3 additional ingredients that we added, I think that becomes clear. The first one is horseradish. Horseradish is really an incredible herb. I mean, it's a root, right? That does so much balancing, but we included it in this formula because what it does is it thins mucus. So often mucus is too thick. It's either too thick or too thin. In most people, but in most cases, we imbalance on the side of too thick, plugged up, and then we try to take drugs that force a change there. That is just a vicious cycle. However, when we just take nutrition instead of the drug approach, horseradish in particular, we can see a world of difference, and I can attest to that because this was an area that I really suffered from and don't. Very, very rarely does it become a nuisance to me anymore if I'm really not paying attention and not taking care of myself. So what does horseradish do? It actually thins the mucus and improves a natural flow, loosens it when it's become hardened. It boosts both through that and other components that it has. It boosts immunity. So the one interesting study was that people with a cold who took horseradish had the cold for almost half the time. The actual number was 40% faster recovery. So we're talking, almost, half the suffering that you would without, but by something so simple as just adding horseradish to the diet. Now, there's another interesting study. I don't know why. I want to know why it was conceived this way, because they looked at inflammation of the sinus, sinusitis, and bronchitis. And they also looked at UTIs using horseradish. It was a huge study. We're talking over 1,600 people were in this study. And what they found was that they compared simply using horseradish, so eating horseradish every day. I'm not quite sure what the amounts were. You could probably read them in the study, to someone taking antibiotics. And what they found, and antibiotics known to help quite significantly all these situations. And what they found is they got similar results with the horseradish and none of the side effects, much safer. We all know what side effects come from antibiotics. So this is a very large study that kind of illustrated why horseradish and why certain herbs can do exactly what Eric is saying. They work with the immune system in a balanced way and it's just more effective. And so those imbalances are shorter duration and shorter severity often as well. So that's the first ingredient, horseradish. The next one is horseradish again, but it's Japanese horseradish. I guess in common terms, we call it wasabi. So that's Wasabia japonica would be its actual name. I'm spacing I was going to say clinical, but it's not clinical. Anyway, why is wasabi in there? Much more potent, this root. A very, very small amount is needed. And in fact, we put a very small amount, but we have a very highly concentrated extract that we use. Airflow, so respiration is greatly improved and blood flow is greatly improved. So the immune system, having what it has, if it's balanced, if it's also being fortified, flows much more quickly and efficiently when wasabi japonica is in the diet. There are several components in there. One of them, if I pronounce it right, is called allyl isothiocyanate. And I know, big old name doesn't mean a lot to me, but what I do know that it does, more air is in the sinus spaces, better oxygenation, the mucus flows better, and certain pathogens are killed. So it does kind of do all those things, sort of a triple threat. And that's why it's in the formula. Now, the last thing in the formula, I don't have to stare at my screen to talk to you about. It's the additional adaptogen. So because we don't have the macas from the Excel, remember we pulled out half the Excel formula, and then we've added horseradish and then Japanese horseradish. We wanted to add one of our, actually, I was anxiously awaiting the product to use this. This is from Brazil. It's called, its name sort of means the sum total. You could translate it that way. Suma, but it means in Portuguese, for everything. Its nickname is, it's like all adaptogens, incredibly balanced, lots and lots of different active components in it. And I think it got its fame because of what it does with immune performance, specifically immune performance. Now, so that being said, that is why we added it. Our Suma, I am trying to remember, I think it's a 10 times concentrate. I think it's a 10-to-1 powder that we use in here, just to give you an idea. And I'll just end with a little, what I think is a fun story. We had someone show up at our offices, not our warehouse. This is not where we sell product, but we keep a little product here. And we do have a few people who live locally like to come pick them up. Well, a lady heard that from someone. She couldn't even give us the name of the person who referred her. This was several years ago, right after we came out with Solle Clear SI. And this poor customer service agent was trying to be helpful, trying to find out who's your mentor, how can I connect, because this is what we do. And person couldn't give any names. She says, I came here because I've had this dry hacking cough for years. I don't remember how many years, just years. Can't get rid of it. Sometimes it almost goes away, comes back, almost goes away. She was the poster child of what Eric's talking about. When things become chronic and we cannot get our immune system balanced. So since we were just talking about this new product, customer support agent, you gotta love that, says, hey, maybe you should try this product. So she buys a bottle of the Solle Clear SI. 4 days later, something like that, 4 or 5, like a week later, we get this phone call. I need you guys to tell me what else is in that, because I didn't tell you this, but I hadn't had my monthly cycle in like 9 months. And my cycle came through X number of days after I started using this. Do you have a hormone balancer in there? Well, Suma, yeah, actually Suma will do that. And in fact, one of the other plants that I talked about, there is some hormone, I can't remember which one it is. It might be, I can't remember. But so there are a couple, but Suma's the biggie there. And so, yes, that whole relationship, because I'm thinking about what Erica was teaching about serotonin and different hormone levels that affect immunity. No wonder Suma is so good, because it's particularly strong in hormone balancing. So she asked this question. We said, no, there's nothing else added. But that's the Suma. And she says, oh yeah, by the way, in like 3 days, my cough went away. So, and then hadn't heard. Now we did later find her mentor, just so you know. but never did that cough never did come back. So yeah, SoClear SI is a powerful, powerful add-on. And I'll give it back to you. I've got to run, but thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming and sharing. We always appreciate you and your wisdom.
See you next week.
Thank you. All right. Thank you so much. Now, I will tell you guys, SoClear SI is definitely one of my favorite products. And it's kind of interesting. A quick anecdote, like Greg just shared, SoClear SI, I looked at the formula and I was like, oh, these are good ingredients, right? And but I never realized how good they were until, like, I live in like the allergy capital of the world. And I haven't had any allergies like we have, you know, twice a year oak pollen and grass allergies all summer. And we have, like, you know, Texas cedar fever. It's like famous, right? It has, like, they name it. And I was like severely allergic, would get severe cedar allergies every year. And I would get, you know, oak allergies and all the things. And I have not had really any seasonal allergies in the last 4 years. I don't take any type of medication for it or anything. And I didn't really realize how important this was until I was talking to my dad about a year ago. And he was telling me that he didn't believe that this product would work. And he had such severe respiratory issues that he was taking, you know, like all the, you know, different things that, like, you know, the Zyrtex and all of those that you take for your sinuses. And he had been using these so long that he had actually atrophied the alveoli in the lungs. So his lungs could not actually even fight off the things as well as they could before, because the little pockets had actually shrunk. And so they had him on steroids to try to, you know, just constantly fight this. And I had him switch over about a year ago to SoClear. He was convinced it wasn't going to work. He was like, I'll just try this one bottle and I'll be done with it. And about a week later, my mom told me, like, your dad's not going to tell you, but it's working and he can finally breathe. Like, he hadn't been able to breathe for like almost a year, and now he can finally breathe. I will tell you one thing about him. He still hasn't told me that my SoClear SI actually works, but he does order it every single month. So I know it must be working just fine for him, because he is the biggest skeptic when it comes to natural herbal formulas. So I love SoClear SI, and specifically for clearing out the body, clearing out the mucus passages, clearing out everything. Just like you heard, like, if somebody hasn't had a cycle in a long time, your body needs to clear that out. Like, it's supposed to, otherwise it gets stuck in there and it's not doing good things. That's actually, you know, when we hear different types of things, you know, there's different diseases and stuff that are kind of related to the body not clearing out these toxicities. Let me scroll real quick through the chat, make sure we didn't have any questions. I love your, you guys' like your testimonials for SoClear SI and how much it has helped you. Like I said, I think it's such an incredible formula to, even if we're just adding it right now, like, you know, as we're going into, like, you know, a season where people get more sick or like back to school, you know, it's a great formula for your kids. I use it with both of my kids. So they're being more exposed to people at school. It's a great time to just kind of put it in there and boost their little bit of immunity. Even if you're not using it year round, like I said, I do. I actually use it daily, and I take 3 every single day. And then if I have a challenge, I'll take even more, right? Like, so I might take it multiple times in a day if I'm having a challenge going on. But even if you're not doing it daily, it's a good time to add it in. Yes?
Yeah. I take it for prevention of cysts. So there's just so many neat things to take it for. I always tell women also, you take it right as you're in premenopause or near that time where your life changes, because you want to make sure you clear out anything that, you know, has like this lady was saying, right? I think that's amazing, because women come into menopause and then they're like, okay, I haven't had my period forever. I'm done. And then all of a sudden in their 50s, they are, you know, having this because they're taking SoClear as you taught. And so it's amazing what it does. I love this product.
Yes, definitely. Super, super amazing. So next week, we're going to be talking about the art of safe detox, and is there a such thing as detoxing that's not safe, and what we can do to reduce detox symptoms when we do need to actually, and when we need to detox. So we'll talk about that, when we actually need to detox, and how to do it in a safe manner, so we're not actually getting ourselves more sick. So that'll be next week. We look forward to seeing you. Invite your friends. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. Bye-bye.